Okay, good morning and welcome to the Global Landscapes Forum Bonn Digital Conference 2020. We are now in day 3 of our conference, the last day. There's been a lot of interesting speakers, discussions, panels, videos. It's been quite an incredible conference, even in the spite of COVID-19 pandemic, where we're all signing in from across the globe. It's still been a great conference. And I'm Natasha Elkington, your host for this live session. And this morning, I'm very excited to introduce my next guest, who is Pasi Vainikka, who's the co-founder and CEO of Solar Foods, a company that uses renewable energy and carbon dioxide to create a nutrient and protein-filled powder that is similar to wheat and bland tasting, and it's called Solein. It is a new protein that the company claims is 100 times more climate-friendly than any animal or plant-based products, and 10 times more efficient than soy production in terms of land use. Vainikka believes humanity is on the verge of a new food revolution, and Solar Foods is already ahead of the game. So I'd like to welcome Pasi to the show and look forward to having our interview. Thanks, Pasi.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And just one thing to our audience, please let us know where you're signing in from, where you're watching, and send us your questions. If you want to have any questions for Pasi, I'll be happy to share them with him. We'll begin our interview. I guess we'll just go straight into it. So I'll ask you, for those of us who are not so scientifically inclined, can you simply explain to us how you make a protein from thin air, I guess?
Yeah, what we're doing actually is quite complex food. I mean, it's proteins, but what we are using is basically cell as a factory. But as a process, it's very simple. What we're doing is fermentation. And you could compare our process to winemaking, for example. So in winemaking, you have a fermenter that you have a sugar's liquid, and sugar is energy. It's a source of energy and carbon for the yeast that grows and makes alcohol to a surrounding liquid by eating sugar for energy or carbon. Our organism, which is basically a naturally curing organism as well. So we've screened it from the environmental samples, in this case, from the Finnish soil. So we're just taking advantage of the diversity of life. And this microbe, which is bacteria actually, we also have in a fermenter, but instead of sugars, we feed to this organism carbon dioxide and hydrogen. And that's the very important point where the disconnection from agriculture happens. So we don't feed any carbonaceous or product of agriculture, but hydrogen and CO2. CO2 we capture from the air. We can use it also other sources of CO2 wherever it's sustainably available. And then hydrogen we make with electricity. So basically we split water with electricity to hydrogen and oxygen. And then hydrogen, instead of sunlight, our organism eats these small bubbles of hydrogen for energy instead of sunlight, and carbon dioxide as a source of carbon. And that's basically what the plants do as well.
Amazing. So how did you actually come up with this? I guess would be a very good question. What was the journey to get here?
Yeah, there is actually a clear, let's say, storyline and reasoning why we do what we do. Mm-hmm. Actually, my background is not in food at all, but I used to be in charge of the single largest renewable energy research programs, what we've had in Finland when I was at the research institute. And if we think of the global emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, about 70% originate from the energy system, 70 to 75%, and the remaining quarter is due to what we eat. Now, when we're looking at how to build a sustainable energy system for the future, based on 100% renewable power, so solar and wind and energy storages and all this research we were doing, we had two key findings in that program. The first one was that instead of burning and mining fossils from underground, coal, gas, oil, which is a process that we need to stop, instead of using this as a source of energy, we need to electrify things. So whether it's solar, wind, hydro, or nuclear, it's another debate, but carbon neutral power is the new primary energy. and shifting from burning fuels to electrified system. A good example of that is basically electric vehicle, where although it has four wheels and so on, it looks a bit the same as before, but all the technology has changed in the powertrain and how it communicates, and there are many aspects. And it empowers the individual to be part of the energy system, because basically from the electricity market you can buy whatever kind of electricity what you want, but when you fill a car at the gas station with petrol, the dialogue with the oil company is a bit difficult, but you can actually be an active decision maker in the electricity market. So electricity as a new primary energy. And then the second finding was that if we leave fossil fuels in the ground, where do we get fuels for aviation, marine and transport, medicines and materials, plastic-like materials, where we need carbon as an inherent building block and maybe as an energy carrier, let's say for aviation. And we ended up making fuels from air with electricity. But then we started, it was a kind of a depressing to me personally to find out that even if we would install all this amazing technology and this electrified future, would realize still with the increasing population of the planet, increasing standard of living, which usually means historically that there's more consumption of animal-based protein, that's not good enough to save the planet. I mean, to reinvest the energy system to something new, but actually we need fundamentally more efficient food system. But with this lengthy story, it's easy to understand why we started to think that could you actually turn electricity and carbon dioxide to edible calories? And then our CTO today at Solar Foods, Juha-Pekka, an amazing scientist, then knew that there are such forms of life that actually can eat these ingredients to grow and build basically all the amino acids and carbohydrates, vitamins from these building blocks that are in the air.
Oh, amazing. The food for the future, I guess.
Yeah.
We hope, right? Yeah. So in terms of getting this on the market, like how far are you right now in terms of figuring out? I mean, can you eat it now? Have you already tried to?
Actually, you can. We've made about a dozen of different kinds of food products out of our ingredients. So we have a pilot plant today that can produce this ingredient. Basically, it's a very fine powder. That is about 65% protein, and now we're looking at to integrate it to different kinds of foods. So actually, there are many things what you need to be, what you need to have to be on the market and scale. Of course, we needed to find a correct, right type of organism that grows efficiently, good nutritional value, and so on. And then we needed to invest to a pilot plant, so that we can actually generate sufficient quantities of this material, because you need to do extensive testing to it in order to have what we call a novel food approval. So you can't feed it to human before you prove that it's good for food, and that's basically the stage where we are now to produce the quantities for the novel food dossier, which is the terminology there, and we need to permit it in the European Union and basically every country where we go to, FDA in the US and so on. And then maybe thirdly or fourthly, you need to achieve good functionality. So if you go to our customer and a product developer of, let's say, plant-based meat alternative or alternative dairy or plant-based yogurt product developer, they don't really care everything what I just explained. Right. But they only are interested on the functionality, that does it form a gel, which means yogurt, or how does it, what are the different properties that you need to have, what kind of dough it forms if you want to make a bread and so on. And this is what we are exploring now.
Okay, and then so in terms of like food that we eat, is it similar to soy? Would that be the closest?
Yeah, correct. So although what we are doing is it's not traditional, still we claim that actually it could be the most natural food we've ever had during our lives in the modern society, because it's completely natural organism what we are using, and not non-modified one. And basically all the foods what we have today, they've gone through different kinds of processing. Even we have different kinds of milk and milk-like drinks. It's not really directly from the cow at all, The tomatoes, bananas, all these things, they are basically not natural. But we do have a really original organism. Then again, it's just another form of life what we have on the planet. So amino acid profile, fats and carbs, what you have there is basically as in any other organism, and therefore it is very actually identical to soy when you look at the main composition, amino acid profile, high in vitamin B12, high in iron, and so on.
Amazing. So do you see that, like if, once everything is, you're on the market and you're ready to go, that in terms of scaling up, like, worldwide as a food, how do you see the future with solar foods, with this type of, we're changing our...
One is that being a scientist from background, I and we as a company, we don't tend to offer silver bullets. Okay. But then again, you could say that with the increasing population on the planet, increasing standard of living, FAO says that we would need about 70% more calories on the planet by mid of the century. And now we are using about 50% of the arable land, what we have for agriculture. We're already using 50% of it. So how do you produce 70% more calories out of that? I haven't figured that out. So we need something really more efficient and also perhaps let animal production go. Right. So therefore we need fundamentally something new, and what we do and how do we come into play is that we think ourselves as a new primary ingredient. So if you think where food comes from, so there is arable land or forage land or cereals, different kinds of crops and fruits and vegetables, and then they are processed on the way to things like bread or fruit salad or whatever lasagna you're having. But they are from these primary ingredients. But now what we're doing, we are introducing to humankind a new primary ingredient that swims into something what we find familiar, like breads or let's say in lasagna, we could be in the pasta or in the sauce or in the meat part, two different kinds of ways without the consumer really knowing that the background, how the calories arrived where it was completely changed.
Wow. Quite revolutionary, actually. I guess that's a good word to describe what's going on here. And you know that the theme of this conference is food in the time of crisis. So why do you think, like right now, especially with this pandemic, that we should be focusing on how, our food production or how we take food? Like, do you think like more now than...
Having said that, having background in energy, which is a problematic industrial sector, but food system is even more interesting because it has many more problems than the energy system, because there is the water availability, land availability, there is the climate change, so let's say droughts or different kinds of extreme weather conditions, and you might lose the whole kind of crops that you grew on 1 year. So the whole harvest for 1 year could be lost. Then you have eutrophication, so using pesticides, but also excessive amounts of fertilizers, nitrogen-based and phosphorus-based on open land, and you have eutrophication, things like that. Also, the global peak fish catch was 20 years ago, and after that the wild catch has been in decline, and basically we've been able to balance that out by creating an industry called aquaculture. About half of marine catch is actually from aquaculture. It's not natural anymore. So there are many of these conflicts. So what these been piling up on the way, it's nothing new, but maybe these times underline these problems, and we are there to try to disconnect from all of this, and that's kind of our gift to the society. Then it is the COVID-19 times when we are doing this, and I think one of the outcomes could be, there are a couple of things that don't have to do with new food technology. For example, people appreciating the cultural side of food more, after this. So you've maybe had your lunchbox at the office for several months and not really met the people or go around the block to get the bread from the local bakery or something like that, or coffee on the way and meet the person there that you meet every morning. So after all this, you might appreciate the social interaction, without mentioning what you meeting friends at the restaurants and so on. So there's a lot of culture around the food, which will remain, and we appreciate it. And then again, we need to produce there at the back the primary calories in a sustainable way, and that is the part what we want to do, so that the culture part could also flourish in the future, and there would not be too much pressure on that system. So that's kind of the social part of it, and nothing to do with food tech. But then transparency in the food system it might be one thing. These outbreaks, they say, have to do with animal keeping and industrialized animal keeping and agriculture at different stages. Now in the case of this virus and also before, so it might be that people are more interested on transparency there. We can offer that. So let's see what the aftermath will be, but at least maybe it's not working against us.
Right. Yes, we hope so. So I guess maybe just going back to your to speaking about Solein, because you're basically delinking, like we discussed earlier, agriculture from food production. So do you think this is sort of the way that humanity is going to be looking in terms of us staying on this planet? Because like you said, we've used 50% of arable land. So should food companies be looking at how to produce food in kind of like following your way, like delinking from agriculture?
Delinking is one aspect. There are three. Delinking is one. Inventing something to replace. So basically, the animal-based proteins are basically the primary problem in the food system. If you need to put finger on one, or good or not, but that is the case. It's too much of a burden. And then what we see now in the food tech is that milk is being produced without cow in laboratories. Eggs are being produced without chicken in the laboratories. We also have our ingredient kind of swimming into the products. Cultured meat companies are developing their products. So all these have to do with disconnecting from the current form of agriculture, although the other ones need some agricultural primary input for the energy and carbon. And that's kind of our part to deal with in the future, to feed also. Instead of feeding cows, we could actually feed with our ingredient the cell factories in the future. So it would be ending up at different companies and technologies to form a new kind of value chain that bypasses basically everything what we have to do, although the end product is the same. So it's the real meat. And we see the venture capital industry now, in my view, food tech is in about same situation where we were in the ICT in the 80s, late 80s. So basically the cards are dealt now. They're the behind for those that will be the primary drivers and companies for the new agricultural industry. And that is basically, after a decade, we know how it turned out to be.
Yeah, I mean, because like yesterday I had an interview with the world's strongest vegan, and he's like Wolverine. Yeah. It's actually based in Germany, and he's massive, and he's a strength trainer, but vegan. Do you think that humanity has to start looking maybe a bit more of like leaving eating meat and animal products to a more healthy existence on this planet?
Yeah, having animal products to be strong is kind of an urban legend, but it's something what doesn't really hold. So if we look at our ingredient, it also, if you look at our material on the website or this ingredient here, you can see actually that it's yellow. So it has some if you added a lot, you could taste some carrot taste. So that there are carotenoids, and so basically that turn to vitamin A and are good for vision. So you could, with just by using this diversity of life, you could have the amino acid profile of meat and B12 that you typically get through animal products or meat, and also the health effects of carrot at the same time in a piece of bread. So it's actually not the same, but it's a lot better than everything what we've had before. So that's what we are planning. And then there are other companies who and personalized nutrition is also something that is developing. So this is just the beginning.
Great. So I was asking you earlier, what is the link to space? I remember because you had like we had an astronaut in one of our sessions, speaking to us yesterday, making food up there. And I remember reading something about solar foods and space.
European Space
Your space agency, yes. What's the link there?
Yeah, we had a last year project. Let's see if we can continue around a feasibility study or rather pre-feasibility for food production, so lean production for Mars missions, because still we haven't gone to send human to outer space. So we've been just close about to planet Earth and to the moon.
Right.
And those trips you can make with packed food, so the shelf life is enough. But if you go to Mars, the shelf life would need to be several years, and then the volumes are larger than for the longer missions that you would need. Actually, you could send food beforehand, and then kind of as a backup, of course use that, and that is done in every case. But the case for us is that because we don't need arable land, then we could actually take our process to space mission, and the concept what we are using actually was first mentioned and discovered as a phenomena in the 60s in connection to early space research. So they were looking at different kinds of food sources for space missions, and this was identified as an organism that could work, but it never. It's like an electric vehicle that it was invented 100 years ago, but it never turned out to be really and scale. But let's see now. Times are different, and we have a lot of electricity available in Mars, and also we can circulate the carbon dioxide that we breathe out. Also, there's a backup because the gas atmosphere of Mars is mostly CO2, so we also could take advantage of that. So the outcome was that a fermenter with about 40-liter volume could produce a protein for a crew of 6 for a mission like that.
Wow, amazing. Very cool. So I guess my last question, I guess, from me is, what are the main challenges that you're facing right now to get this, product on the market and, scale up? Is it just still experimenting? Okay.
Time is something that it's a regulated environment, and we're happy with that. It's okay. We also know what the regulation is and how you deal with it, but it's still we have the material and we could sell today something little in principle, but we need to go through the regulation, which is fine. But then of course it requires some patience, and also patience by the investors, that we are in this kind of a medical technology kind of business where there are costs associated pre-revenue. So that's something specific what we need to deal with on the way. And we do need to build also a factory. There's one difference also here compared to, let's say, to mobile apps, that we need to build a factory that costs quite a lot before we can be on the market. So pulling all this together to be on the market in a timely manner is requires some effort, but yeah, why not? Let's have it.
Yes, exactly. And we're hoping, you said to 2022, you hope that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we
Okay,
previously said 21, but it's not realistic anymore, at least in the European Union. Let's see.
right. Okay, but still a short time, 2022 is around the corner.
Yeah, that's correct,
Yeah.
actually. So basically, in our website and some of the media, you can really see our process. So we wanted to share this to be transparent, and it is really happening. So it is physically there. So it's not that far away.
Great. So now I have quite a few questions from our audience that I'll pose to you. So the first one I have here is, how do your organisms build proteins? Nitrogen is needed, right? Question by Len Milch.
Perfect. I knew the nitrogen thing will come up. So
Cool.
when we say food out of thin air, it's 95% true. And the 5% has to do with the fact that when we grow the organism in this liquid, in the media, we need to provide the same inorganic element, about 20 of them, in the media as water-soluble salts that are the same that plants take through roots. So you need the mineral in the media. Then the 95% of the story is, and what we all are made of, little boys and girls, where 95%-ish plus minus something, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen.
Right.
And nitrogen we also get from the air. So direct air capture of CO2 we discussed, and also water can be captured from the air and will be captured depending upon where we locate our factories also existing. And our source of nitrogen is ammonia in water solution. We do need that. And ammonia is basically a fertilizer, what is also used today to open lab fertilization. So it's the same. And there's an existing process called Haber-Bosch technology, how you take molecular nitrogen from the air and combine it with hydrogen to form NH3, which is basically the ammonia molecule. And this we put in a water solution and have it in the media when it's fed. So it is also produced from the air. And for those who are technically inclined and would like to have this detail, in our process, what we are doing is we're turning electricity to edible calories, and with about an efficiency of 20% from the electricity to the calories that are here.
Okay.
And the energy is charged and consumed in the production, in the electrolysis that we discussed early on. So splitting water basically. And we are producing a lot of hydrogen for the organism, and then we divert part of that through the ammonia production. About 5 to 7% of the hydrogen goes through the nitrogen cycle to feed the organism.
Well, there you go. So that answers that, doesn't it? And then we have a question here from Jose Estrada. Is there a possibility to start a food revolution introducing insects, seaweeds, and mushrooms?
Yeah, it's part of the story. Yeah, we can see also that happening. Definitely part of the story. I see there are different aspects. One is you produce something similar to what we've used to, like cultured meat is supposed to be identical to what we've had now. Then you have more sustainable sources of various kinds, let's say seaweeds or mushrooms, insect protein, that somehow process of the existing ingredients, what there are, or somehow are connected to that, and then we are kind of in the new primary ingredient part of the story. Let's say insect, in my view, it's a process where you efficiently perhaps recirculate some of the food waste, perhaps through the insects to an edible protein and back to the food system. So it's a quite could be effective reprocessing of reformulation of the food waste and divert it back. Just to give one example how I position this. So that's different to providing a new primary ingredient.
Right.
And then mushroom is very interesting because let's see how it scales. That's one side of the coin. The other one is that it does bring very interesting umami meat-like functionality to many foods. So thereby it might be that you don't need it volume-wise and calorie-wise, but it adds something essential so that plant-based meat alternative would taste like meat.
Like meat, right. Interesting. And so for Francis Camille Rivera is asking if there are any side effects to in the human body for taking the Solein. Like
We're aware of, and of course that's if there are things like that, then we need to deal with those, meaning that there is some kind of process or another organism. I understand that what we are saying is it sounds strange and it's not traditional, but then again, it's just another. If you would discover another type of rice or another kind of potato, it's just protein as any. So therefore we need to do all the details and homework and all the testing, but still the kind of the boring side of the story is just food as any.
And then in terms of testing, so how are you testing it? So how do you test that if it's,
There are many different kinds of things. So you of course need to do toxicological test to start with. That's very obvious. Then you need to plan in what kind of food products you would offer that in the future, so that you have an idea of the daily intake. Then allergenity is another one, antibiotic resistance, and then you end up to basically functionality tests. So that's not what's part of the regulation, but not kind of in the heart of it, but still to if you want to have the ingredient in drinkable products, in spoonable, and in meat alternative, you need different kinds of functionalities, and you need to have the functionality for the ingredient. Maybe you might heat it or something like that. Not going into the details here to make it suitable for that application. And after that, you go through the testing for the specific type of ingredient. So we do really go through all that in very detail. And then it ends up a bit unfortunate, but currently we're exploring that. Is it possible to make a dossier without animal testing? So basically rat testing. And we would hope that there is a way. But if not, then we can't do anything but follow the regulation. But that's basically part of the story, so that you would really have it tested.
Right. So that's all in the pipeline, right? That's all what you guys are working on right now, trying to get this on the market. I get that. We have one question here about what about energy use? Does the life cycle analysis add up in terms of the amount of renewable infrastructure needed to support the production?
Yes, it does add up to what we are doing is the also what we discussed early on was the background myself in energy systems and things like that. So what we saw, what has happened despite whatever we do in the food tech and food system, what has happened in the energy technology is that wind and solar, basically they were laughed at 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So expensive and so dilute and doesn't make any sense, but not anymore, because wind power is the cheapest source of new power generation in, let's say, windy countries and locations and latitudes where we come from. And in the sun belt of the planet, solar PV has become the cheapest source of power on the planet. Now it's more of the question. So when we were in the research, we saw that coming, although it was difficult to defend the future at that time. in public discussion, but here we are now.
Yes, we are.
We had this in the heart of the company and its vision already quite a few years ago. We saw it coming. And now it's more of the question that where do those areas, for example, that have a good solar resource, let's say desert in country X, in Gulf, for example. So where do you put this electricity? Can you think that as a new raw material? And what would you turn that electricity to that would be most valuable? And we have our guest here. But it does mean that instead of sunlight that we consider is received as kind of a gift every day, and we don't really have to consider that. It is true that it's been working like that. Now what we need is a solar panel there in between to make the electricity and hydrogen, and then feed it to the organism. But still, if even we would do that, invest and consider the land area needed for the solar panels to run a factory, still we would could produce about 10 times more per hectare than what soy produces. So we need less land and not arable land, and therefore we could let a forest grow back on those areas where forests can grow, and basically offer carbon negative technology on system level for the society.
Cool, very cool. So I have one more question here. Very trendsetter proposal. I wonder, how do you plan to engage consumers with this new foodstuff? What are the cultural codes you are addressing? From Gabriela. Sort of.
Very good point. So one is that, like the discussion what we are having here, and me trying to again, referring to the research life, you when you were doing energy futures research, you need to defend the future that no one has been.
Right.
Neither myself. The same is what we are trying to do here, is that we need to explain what we are doing to people, to start think that actually science is quite amazing, but real. And then to start to consider, and then what we are just simply doing is providing new alternatives to the people, and then it's up to them. So the people to feel empowered that you have these choices. So it's up to you, and then describing all these things so that people will be ready on the way before in the market. That's where we are right now. But then I would also answer to that from the point of view that as a consumer, you wouldn't see a difference. We are not going to offer you powder or pills, but you will have a milk as before. But how it was produced will change. You will have meat and meat alikes like before, but there was just no cow involved, and or egg, and still you would get at least the same or even better nutrition from that food. And what we are not doing, we are not replacing things like tomatoes and vegetables. They are as is, but neither they are a big environmental problem. But the kind of protein and animal part is mostly that, but the consumer product would be as before. Okay,
I guess also for one question from me is in terms of food security. I mean, this could be a solution, for food insecurity that we're facing, right, in the future. Are we also looking at that aspect with with all these weather, like drought prone places, like you said, losing your harvest, in Africa we're facing a lot of climate issues. Is that part of the thinking too with Solar Foods in terms of food security?
Yeah, that's also one of the aspects and kind of byproducts, one of the benefits. And those tedious dependencies what we have as a humankind. You have a dependence for certain areas on the planet for energy today in the fossil energy world, and dependence on agricultural land. And if something happens to the land, availability of land or climate, then you might be water constraint or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you disconnect from all of that, then I mean, you're correct. It can improve security, and kind of new locations on the planet can be the food source, and at least in what comes to our technology. And then, quite interestingly, I could give a heads up here. In 3 weeks' time, about we are going to publish a map of the new protein world order. Basically, we've done a global study for modeling renewable power generation globally, and then also stimulated through this modeling to produce protein in every node of the planet, basically 50 kilometers squared for the whole of the planet, and how much protein you could get, and at what cost, and what would be the primary energy, and how much land you would need, and things like that. And there's going to be a map where you can go to your local area and see that if Solein production would take place there, so how much it would cost, and how it would be.
Great, very cool. So how do we, like in 3 weeks, how do we sign in or find out? We just
you will find something similar to Google Earth on our website. Basically, there will be the planet Earth, and you can dive in and rotate and zoom in to see where this protein would come from.
Okay, great. So it looks like we actually have just 4 minutes left for our really, really interesting interview, and great questions from the audience too. So I guess to wrap up, do you have any closing messages, for your audience, or for the Global Landscapes Forum, or for, the world right now is facing this pandemic at the moment? Anything that you feel like, you want to close our conversation with?
One thing is that I've said that I'm not an optimist or pessimist, but a possibilist, and I hope that people could hopefully think if they could use this approach when they see new kinds of foods and possibilities. Also, I'm not part of that group who said that we need many things, let go of many things to save the planet. Rather, I see that if there's a problem, there can be new solutions, technologies many times, like ourselves, to solve these problems, and the consumer wouldn't need to compromise really on, let's say, food product and taste and functionality and what as you've had ever before. But it's the role of the new companies like us to provide those alternatives so that people will be completely happy, not to compromise, and empower the individual for good decisions. And also in the it's the COVID-19 times, and there will be post-COVID-19 times, and some say that it's a kind of a post-truth times. But then it's important for the scientists to come out and say that science is like magic but real.
Great. And I think I really appreciate also the transparency that you have with your company. So, everyone can see, how things are produced and how the food is produced. So yeah, I think transparency and truth are definitely the way forward.
Yeah, thanks. And I think we need we have a lot to explain too. So doing our best.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time and for giving us all this information and insight into your product. And I wish you all the best. Hopefully we'll see it on the market soon.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll definitely check out your website in a couple of weeks to check out where solar foods can be produced. Thank you again, Pasi.